Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fenske. Have you heard the one about the emotional support peacock? It got barred from a United flight, but wow, those photos from the airport. And how about the emotional support pig that got bounced off a U.S. Airways flight after defecating on board? Some passengers are fed up about sharing their airspace with a veritable zoo. And closer to home, in Creve Coeur, neighbors are crying foul about a local woman's emotional support monkeys. It's a charged topic, and our guests today are here to help us understand the rules, the rights enjoyed by those who truly rely on support animals, and where some animal lovers might be skating over the edge. Here to discuss this fascinating topic is Cassie Boness. She's a PhD psychology student at the University of Missouri and the co-author of a paper on this topic published in the American Psychological Association. She's joining us by phone today. Cassie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we're also joined today by Dan Coldy. He's an attorney locally who specializes in animal cases. Dan, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
Do you have an emotional support animal? What role does it play in your life? Or contrarily, have you seen people take advantage of the right enjoyed by those with these animals? Give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL on air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. Now, Dan Coldy, let's just start things off to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. What is an emotional support animal, and how is it different from a service animal?
Okay, so a service animal is an animal that is specifically trained to perform a specific task or function. A guide dog for the visually impaired, a dog that assists a person in a wheelchair. There's animals that can detect oncoming seizures, dogs that can sense when the owner's about to have an attack from a diabetic attack. Mm-hmm. So a service animal is specifically trained for a specific function related to a disability. And those are required under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And your service animal you can take into the grocery store, you can take into public places. Emotional support animals or therapy animals are animals that generally provide comfort. You can't point to a specific task. But again, the person that's requesting it has to have a documented disability, and you can't take those into public. But under the Fair Housing Act, you can have your therapy or comfort animal in your home.
Okay, so there's really two places where if you have your therapy or emotional support animal, you get some additional rights, let's say. One of those is your home.
Yes.
Your landlord can't discriminate against you if you are certified with one of these.
Yes. No, your landlord has to allow both your service and your emotional support animal.
Okay. And the one that really seems to get people riled up is on the airplanes.
Airplanes.
Dan Coldy, what is sort of the origin of people getting to fly with their therapy pets?
That is the Air Carrier Access Act that was passed specifically to give the disabled access to airlines to travel. I don't think many of us would object to the guide dog for the visually impaired. When we start getting into peacocks and pigs and, it gets a little more trickier. I don't think the public likes those as much. And, there's always that undercurrent of people that are maybe we think trying to take advantage of the system to travel with their pets and not have to, which is understandable. Lots of dogs die in airplanes in the cargo parts every year. So people, I think, are trying to get their pets on when maybe they don't necessarily have a documented disability.
It's not a true therapy animal. Cassie Boness, what got you interested in studying this topic?
A little bit about what's kind of already been said. So we started noticing that there were these animals kind of, causing problems or being a nuisance on airlines mostly. And as we became aware of the way that the Air Carrier Access Act is written, it became very apparent that licensed mental health professionals were the ones being called upon to write these letters or to write these certifications for emotional support animals. So that's kind of how we got interested in the topic.
So you were looking at it almost from the perspective of, are these therapists, what are they called on to do, and are they doing it properly?
Yeah, exactly.
And so what's your take? I mean, do you think therapists are allowing this category of animal to be abused?
We've really trying to take the approach of you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of licensed mental health professionals just kind of aren't aware of some of the issues that are created when we're put in this position. So one of the major ethical issues is that there's actually a role conflict between having to make this comprehensive disability evaluation to say that someone does or does not need an emotional support animal, and the traditional role of a licensed mental health professional, which would be to provide what we would traditionally think of in terms of therapy.
Okay. Now, I know you wrote at some point that if patients are given certifications for an emotional support animal, it means that they and the therapist signing the certification are declaring the patient to be, quote, psychologically disabled with significant impairment in functioning. Do you think people even realize when they're asking their therapist for one of these letters so they can fly with their pet? Are they possibly opening a can of worms here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So one of kind of the long-term unintended consequences is if you're certifying somebody with a disability, you're saying that they have some sort of psychiatric disability, that could cause problems later on in life. For example, if they need some sort of like security clearance, for example. You might also imagine a case where maybe there's a child custody dispute and this parent has received an emotional support animal certification saying that they are psychiatrically disabled. That could obviously have unintended consequences for that individual.
And do you get the sense that therapists are under pressure to make these certifications, even if they're kind of skeptical?
Yeah, as I said previously, I kind of just think it's a lack of knowledge. There weren't a ton of standards or guidelines for mental health professionals up until recently. I think the other issue that definitely creates a conflict here is we've seen kind of this, huge industry developing online where you can go and apply for these emotional support animal letters, and mental health professionals are being compensated for providing those. So they're kind of benefiting monetarily from this as well.
Okay. We got a voicemail about this topic from our listener, Jeannie. Here's what she had to say about her emotional support cat.
My name is Jeannie. My cat has been considered an emotional support animal for about 10, 11 years now. I've got a doctor's letter on it and everything. It's hard to explain this to other people because some people still don't get it. They think it's people just want to get their pony or something on a plane. And I'm amazed how many landlords say they will not even accept emotional support animals or even regular service support animals.
That's our listener, Jeannie, talking about her experience with her emotional support cat. Dan Kolde, do you see there being a problem with landlords not understanding the rights that people like Jeannie have?
Yes, I've actually handled it probably in my career over the last 3-4 years, probably half dozen, both landlords and municipalities. One place I've seen this come up a lot is municipalities that have pit bull bans, and people have emotional support. Their emotional support dog happens to be a pit bull.
How does that work then? Should that triumph over the ban?
The courts have held that yes, it does.
But you have the right to have that pit bull, even if you're in a municipality that has otherwise banned it.
If you meet the other standards. Now, the one thing that I think that people need to realize about this just isn't kind of a black or white issue where you say, okay, I have a disability, therefore I trump, or the municipality says I have an ordinance, therefore I win. What the courts do is they go into very fact specifics about each individual case. So when you hear, a case about the peacock on the airplane, and that sounds ridiculous. Well, there's supposed to be a court and a process behind this where they're going through saying, okay, do you have a documented disability? What benefit does this peacock provide? And then the airline or the person wanting to deny the accommodation has an opportunity to explain why it's not reasonable, because the law only requires a reasonable accommodation, not any accommodation.
Oh, interesting. So even if I had a true therapy pet, if it wasn't reasonable to allow it on a plane, an airline could stop it. Say if it's a hippo or something that's very large.
Or your emotional support tiger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, that could be a problem. Cassie Bonus, it sounds like this is part of the process that you're hoping these therapists will go through, is to do that same sort of fact-finding.
Yeah, we're really kind of pushing for this four-pronged approach. And as Dan said, there are some specific laws that govern ESAs, so we're really urging mental health professionals to become more familiar with those.
And ESAs, sorry, those are emotional support animals there.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So the other components would be this comprehensive assessment of the client, the comprehensive assessment of the animal. So does the animal have things like basic obedience training? Is it actually trained to perform some disability-related task or to alleviate this disability, these symptoms resulting from the disability? And then the third component is to evaluate the client in the presence of that animal. So if the animal provides some sort of comfort or emotional support, there should be some way of observing that or demonstrating that that actually is the case.
Okay. We're going to go here to the phone lines. If you're interested in this conversation we're having, if you have a question for either of our guests, we have a legal expert here and a psychological expert here. You can give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. Or you can send us a tweet at STL On Air or email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. Jennifer, calling from the Central West End. Hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Hi. I have a question for the legal expert, and that is when you said that landlords can't discriminate against an ESA, is that a federal law? Is that just local?
No, that's that's under the Federal Fair Housing Acts. It's the so originally the Fair Housing Act was enacted to counter racial discrimination in housing. Then it was amended in 1988 to include disability. So yes, you know the Fair Housing Act does allow that your landlord needs to give you, again, it has to be a reasonable accommodation for both serviceable and emotional support. There's also a Missouri state law, the Missouri Human Rights Act, that also provides protections against disability discrimination. I've never actually seen an emotional support case under the state law, but
But it exists.
Yes.
Jennifer, is this something that you're dealing with, a specific situation, or?
No, I was just curious about that. My daughter has an emotional support animal, and what some people might not realize, because I also have thought, like many people, really, like, how is this animal doing it? But there are times when that animal will keep somebody alive because somebody is not going to commit suicide if they know that they have a dog or a cat who is relying on them and at home. So
yeah, you make a great point there. I mean, we've been having some fun making fun of the peacocks and all, but there are certainly cases where these animals are life-saving.
No, and yes, there are times when they really are, and somebody might not realize that if they've never dealt with somebody with depression or any real debilitating mental illness, they just might not understand the importance of one of those animals. So anyway, thank you for answering my questions. It's a good topic.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your call. We appreciate that. Let's talk to Kent. He's calling from Wildwood. Kent, hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. My daughter has been diagnosed with PTSD and was prescribed an emotional support animal that she's taken with her to university. There was recently a little drama about the presence of the animal. The university was good, but her roommate forced a move of room. So I want to know what legal rights someone prescribed an emotional animal has compared to that of a service animal. Right? I know that on airplanes, a different law altogether, I think, applies. But I'm just interested in knowing what rights she may have.
Kent, thank you for that question. And Dan, we're really putting you on the spot here today, but so
obviously I cannot give specific legal advice on the radio, just that disclaimer. But I can tell you there is case law out there that has applied the Fair Housing Act to college campus housing. So the Fair Housing Act, it's rentals, it's any place, you're living basically. And yes, you are entitled to a reasonable accommodation, and part of that requires the university engages in an interactive process to, figure out, what's reasonable. And at a certain point, if you can't resolve it, then, there's always complaints to HUD for the fair housing, or complaints to the Missouri Commission on Human Rights if it's a Missouri school, or, obviously finding a lawyer and going through the actual specific facts and what everything is.
Thank you, Kent, for that call. Hopefully Dan's sort of overview there helped clear it up. Dan, I did want to ask you, too, we mentioned this case in Creve Coeur where the woman has apparently 3 emotional support monkeys at the same time that Creve Coeur has banned exotic pets like monkeys.
Yes.
It sounds like in this case she would have the right to have those monkeys.
Well, it's fact specific, so you have to look. There is some case. There's actually 2 cases out there on this
On monkeys.
On monkeys, and actually 2 states. We'll start with this: 2 states, Georgia and Ohio, specifically have in their state law that service monkeys are recognized.
It sounds like Missouri needs a monkey movement here.
Yes, there is also a charity that it's the only one that I could find that provides Capation monkeys, which are real small monkeys, and they train them for these are service animals, not emotional support. But I mean, they have worked with it looks like the government and the veterans providing for spinal cord injuries.
That's
service
interesting.
monkeys. Yeah.
So a monkey could legitimately be a help to someone.
Yes, there was a case in Texas where the requester wanted her service monkey, and there was a local ordinance. Well, the court kind of hedged. It looked like the court would have allowed the service monkey or the emotional support monkey. However, there was evidence that the monkey had bitten the mail carrier.
And that can make a difference
And
here.
that's part of the fact-specific analysis. What's the animal's, the temperament, or, I don't know anything about non-human primate disease, but I mean, are there shots that needed? These are all things that go in there. And the city, in a case like this, will get to push back and explain why they think it's unreasonable. Just because they have an ordinance, though, doesn't mean their ordinance beats everything.
Okay.
They still have to consider, is this a reasonable accommodation in these circumstances? And it really is very fact specific.
And on that note, unfortunately, we are out of time here. I know we have some callers hanging out on the lines, and I'm sorry we weren't able to get to you. But Dan Coldy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah.
And Cassie Bonas, great to talk to you as well.
Thank you.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
The Gateway brings you the day's news from the St. Louis region and across Missouri. It also includes stories from the Illinois side of the river and our Metro East reporter, Will Bauer.
In Alton, in Belleville, in East St. Louis, in Edwardsville, in Cahokia Heights, at Scott Air Force Base, I'm Will Bauer, St. Louis Public Radio.
Listen to reports from Will and all of our journalists weekdays on the Gateway, on the STLPR app, and wherever you get podcasts.